Welcome to another episode of Burning Platform. And this is the last episode of the year. It's been the year of the cloud. So a real honor to have Bob Evans, who runs the site Cloud Wars, on today. I've known Bob for 15 years. Bob, tell us about your background. I mean, my God, Information Week, Oracle, you've seen the enterprise from every perspective. So tell us a little bit about yourself first.
Sure, Vinnie, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you here on Burning Platform. You've always got unique and valuable perspectives to share with people, so it's an honor to be your guest today. Thanks a lot for that. I have toyed around the technology industry for a long time, as you said, from a couple different perspectives. Worked on a big magazine that covered the business side of technology for a long time. And Vinnie, it was probably about 10 or 11 years ago, and I thought, you know, this technology industry is fascinating, and these companies seem to be so extraordinary about creating stuff, and they seem to be not quite so good telling the world about it. And as more business people started to become decision makers about technology, I thought, here's an opportunity to come in. So I worked at SAP for a year and helped them, again, talk more about their customers. I had then a pretty nice adventure, was recruited to work at Oracle for Larry Ellison, and I was their first chief communications officer. And we really tried to build up this notion of, at Oracle, the voice of the customer. What's the business value of all this technology stuff? And then 4 years ago, I'd had a ton of fun at Oracle for about 5 years. And 4 years ago, I left. I've started two businesses that I always wanted to do. One is consulting business, where I help companies in and out of the tech industry talk about themselves in a more customer-centric way. And then 2 years ago, I started the website that you mentioned, Cloud Wars. It's part of the media company that I've started, Cloud Wars Media. So I've been incredibly blessed, Vinnie. It's a great industry, lots of fun, and get to chat with smart people like you and try to learn from you.
Bob, so you have followed enterprise tech for longer than I have, it seems like. But the last year has just been amazing, hasn't it? Not just in enterprise tech, just the heroics I've been cataloging in another series, just make you go, wow. Tell us what has made you go, wow, in the last 8, 10, 12 months.
Vinnie, you know, that it's such a refreshing perspective, right? Because I think for legitimate reasons, a lot of us look at 2020 and just think, you know, please, 2 or 3 more days, we got to get out of here. But in spite of that, there have been some extraordinary things. And I think within the cloud industry, Vinnie, one of the things that I thought was craziest, right? We hear these metaphors like you got to drive the car at 65 miles per hour, change the tire while you're driving, change the wiring on the airplane while it's flying 600 miles an hour. And you know, those are a little goofy or misapplied sometimes. But think about what these tech companies had to do this year. They not only put the pandemic aside, they not only had to continue to innovate and do different things, stay ahead of the markets, guess where the future was going to come, take their customers with them. Then late February, early March hits, and suddenly they have to do all of those things, but even faster. They have to change how they engage with customers, remote delivery of applications and databases that are going to run the world's biggest companies. They had to do that in a totally different way. They had to change who they are and how they are and what they do things. They had to speed those things up. A lot of them shifted some of their management players, and more they built the foundation that I think the whole world now, business people, education, consumers, we just sort of accept it right now. Vinnie, this incredible stuff that's happened in a period of time that if you would have said this 5 years ago, people would have laughed at you and said, that's not possible. It'll never happen. So I think there's an overwhelming number of great things that happened in 2020, setting the stage for an even better 2021.
So Bob, pre-pandemic, moving to the cloud mostly meant go with a SaaS solution, right? Go with Salesforce, go with Workday, go with Oracle Fusion. But I've seen in the last few months a lot more of lifting and shifting, right? So suddenly taking your on-premise to the Google Cloud or the Azure Cloud or the AWS Cloud, but staying with the old applications and maybe even going with a third-party maintenance provider or a cheaper support mechanism is starting to make more and more sense. What are you seeing when you look at the shifts in the cloud?
Vinny, yeah, the any sort of tentative feelings that any business customers had about the cloud, I think were completely wiped out in 2020, right? So it's seen as, it's not just safe to go in the water. The water is the best place to be right now. It is the safest place to be, and it's the most comfortable place to be. And for where companies want to get, right now that we've conditioned, around the world, hundreds of millions, perhaps it's billions of young people, that this is how you'll learn, this is how you communicate, this is how you will engage with the world. I mean, there's no going back, right, Vin? This isn't a temporary thing. And, somewhere in mid-2021, we'll say, oh, okay, now let's all snap back. That's never going to happen. So for businesses, I think we talk so much about digital transformation. It's an extraordinary thing, but these CEOs didn't wake up one day and said, I got to keep everybody busy. Let's do a digital transformation. It's because there's a few billion people around the world who want to live these digitally enhanced lifestyles or digitally driven lifestyles. And so as you work up the value chain, right, these B2B and then B2C companies have to change how they do things. So for those companies to just say, I can move an HR application over here or some other not lightweight, but non-production application over here and think everything's okay. That's just not true, because they're going to see their competitors doing things faster, more capably, more economically, and most of all with a faster move toward innovation. And so I think these barriers are down. And actually, Vinny, I've heard a number of big companies say that it's now coming in some cases from the board of directors or the CEO downward, telling the organization, we have to move faster to the cloud, right? We cannot be caught in this no man's land in between, we're not great at on-premise anymore. We're not really good at cloud, and we're sort of stuck in transition. So I think it's full tilt ahead in every phase of business.
So not just SaaS, but infrastructure as a service, all different. We're gonna have a multi-cloud environment in different ways. Sounds like.
And cloud databases, Vinny, think about that too. The boom in these things. I can't recall exactly what Snowflake's revenue is, but it's $500 million, but they have a $91 billion market cap.
Yep. Let's come back to the amazing IPOs this year. Let's talk about, you've obviously been covering the hyperscalers quite a bit. It would seem like Google this year has, with the new team with Thomas and Rob Enslin and so on, finally getting some enterprise traction. So talk a little bit about that, and then let's talk a little more about the hyperscaler. But let's talk about Google first. What are you seeing there? Yeah,
Vinny, I think, it's only been 2 years that Thomas Kurian's been in charge at Google Cloud, but I think, the historians of business could look at the first 2 years of what he's done at Google Cloud. I think that would stack up pretty well with what any CEO in any industry has been able to achieve in his or her first 2 years as CEO, right? Because there's no question, right? That company so well and what they've done. And it was always highly regarded for the technology that Google Cloud could offer. But they had a mindset there that was almost like they'd go around and they'd bump into big companies and they'd say, why would you have done this over the last 50 years? Why would you run an IT organization that has all sorts of stuff from all different decades and different vendors and it didn't work? Why don't you do it the way we did it? And just start in the cloud and go from there. And there was, I don't know whether it was arrogance or just a detachment, right? Where they didn't know how to talk to customers. And we hear so much today now, it's become a cliche almost, where tech companies say, we have to meet our customers where they are. And I don't think up until Thomas arrived, Google Cloud really had a sense of that. So while they might have had the coolest toy chest full of the best toys, it was very difficult for them to understand how you invite other kids to come in and play with those toys. Thomas came in and I think clearly recognized that, but what he also recognized is that if he wasn't able to change the culture dramatically and very rapidly, the coolest toys in the world are never going to get used if you're not able to convince other people that this can be fun. Come use my toys and let's enjoy this. So Vinny, I think Thomas was overlooked some at Oracle for his ability as a leader, as a manager. They thought, he's the brilliant product guy, but felt not maybe that good with customers, can't lead, people outside of the tech industry. He's just blown away all of those misconceptions. Has been an absolutely phenomenal leader. And their innovation that he's helping to push now with those things like those industry specific solutions as AI driven things that are not quite applications, but they're certainly not infrastructure, but he's kicked open a whole new wave of possibilities and innovation in the cloud. It's quite extraordinary.
Let's stop. I mean, obviously Amazon and Microsoft continue to do very well, and Alibaba in Asia, but it sounds like there's some little bit of life in Oracle's infrastructure cloud. What do you see? I mean, for the longest time, you couldn't really tell what they were doing, even when Thomas was there, right? But between the Zoom and the TikTok and a few other notable customer successes, maybe we shouldn't count them out. What do you think?
Vinnie, Larry Ellison and sort of how he's operated for a long time. And I think this was a classic thing that he did. He looked at the way everybody talked about the cloud, right? There are the three layers: infrastructure, platform, applications. And he looked at this and said, I'm not that good in infrastructure, but I'm good in the middle part, platform, because I have the autonomous database. He said, I'm pretty good in the applications layer. So there's not so much buzz or talk about the middle layer, platform. So I'm going to take my platform thing and I'm going to put it in infrastructure. And I'll change the rules of the game. And I'll change the definition of how people think and talk about cloud. He almost never says platform. He's just, in his mind, he's eliminated that middle spot. He said, so now with autonomous and their new Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, he said, I'm something of a player in infrastructure and applications. And the other part, he said, the Oracle's just seen it go. So it plays to Oracle's strength of, over time, you sort of talk people along until you get to the point where the technology catches up with what they want to do. And then Ellison rewrites the rules of the game to play to his strengths. And so whether now they talk about security and what autonomous database can do, and no human intervention, no downtime when they switch things. And suddenly he has, at least to some extent, he's begun to push these companies that are, have 100 times greater market share, 50 times greater market share than Oracle does, to play a little bit of catch up. No, wait, I can be Gen 2 also. My security is not so bad. And then nobody has anything like autonomous database, a cloud native thing that fixes itself. So he eventually says Oracle will be the first company to have a fully autonomous cloud, end to end, top to bottom. Now, is that pure talk? I'm not sure, but I think Larry Ellison does what he does best, which is he sees things other people don't see. He's audacious enough to put these goals out there, and then he pushes the company hard enough with their ideas to achieve at least some of those. And suddenly it's not checkers that are people playing, it's chess, or it's 3D chess, or it's, some variant that he feels is going to be in Oracle's interest.
One area that doesn't seem to evolve at all is a European version of Alibaba or a European version of Amazon, right? Do you think that hurts SAP, that there is no strong pan-European infrastructure as a service provider?
Vinnie, I don't know. I hadn't thought about it that way, but would you mind sharing your thought on that?
I talked to Holger Müller of Constellation a couple of weeks ago, and his point was, bit players, they've really pretty much lost the market, but they don't want to acknowledge it, right? So the EU will always come after US vendors with their antitrust issues and so on. I mean, honestly, they should get more serious about building a European infrastructure provider, but I don't know if it's going to happen. So, and
right there seemed to be a lot of promise from some of the big telecom companies in Europe for a while. They were going to do it, but it's not as natural or as smooth an evolution as some people would think. And then there's enough other things going on with 5G and, how do you place your bets? Where do you place your bets? IBM could be, a quiet player like that. They're certainly global. I think Amazon's ambition, I would be very surprised if they don't see this same sort of void and try to move into it, and clearly Microsoft as well. And Vin, if I could, the one thing about Microsoft in their Satya Nadella's use of language and the way he's able to translate the vision, that incredible vision that's in his head, into language that people can get. He's the first person I heard talk about data sovereignty, right? Not data residency. That's like a tactical thing. When he talks about data sovereignty, just brought it to a different level. So at least in his mind, he wants to have Microsoft seen as this global thing, right? We don't behave any differently in any continent on earth. We're completely neutral about, where we're based. And we, more importantly, will allow you, our customers, to be able to manage your data, have your data and your applications wherever you want it. So it will certainly be interesting to see, though, who emerges as a leader in that incredible market of Europe.
Microsoft has done a remarkable job in the last few years. I remember I wrote about the data centers 8 or 9 years ago. And the executive, who's not there anymore, basically said, we're a software company. We've never really invested in buildings or data centers. And you could see that they weren't ready for that much CapEx and so on. And once they made the investment, they didn't know what to do with it. Office 365, okay, but it's remarkable how far they've come in the last few years. And of course, Amazon is in its league of its own. We don't even need to. Do you want to brag about AWS a little? I mean, what you've seen from them?
Yeah, Vin, I've got a regular guest on my podcast. His name is Sean Amirati. He's a venture capitalist. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's a professor at Carnegie Mellon. He's also an author and a podcast, a brilliant young guy. He says that if AWS were cut loose from Amazon in an IPO, he said it would, he said from day one, he said it would be one of the 10 most valuable companies on earth. And I said, do you mean most valuable tech company? He said, no, most valuable company of any kind. And I think that's the biggest problem that Amazon faces right now with AWS, is that there will be a lot of companies, and I know Andy Jassy, anybody in his position would do it. He tries to poo-poo that, like, oh, no. He said, customers want to go with the best cloud provider, and if it happens to be a retail company, they're going to pick us if we're the best. I don't think that's true at all. Why in the world would any of these companies want to fund Amazon's encroachment into their own space? I don't get that. So it'll be fun to see from a high level view what they choose to do with that. And somebody, Vinny, I know recently said Amazon will never spin out AWS because AWS is the primary source of profit for Amazon. And it has been, but that lead is diminishing, right? They've got North America quite profitable now. They've got rest of the world made some profit in 2020 for the first time. So I think that's changing. And if you imagine the infusion of cash that an IPO could bring into Amazon, where it's not like Jeff Bezos has small dreams now, but if he had, $150, $180 billion, $200 billion infusion suddenly, it's wild. I do think, Vin, it's been very interesting, strictly with AWS, that they have fairly rigorously avoided getting up into the applications area at all. But if you look at what they're doing in some industry-specific plays, they are certainly headed in that direction. So we're going to have to think maybe in 2021 about some new definitions of cloud services, because the old IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, they're not going to be nearly as relevant.
Absolutely. Industry applications, if you look at their distribution center, their warehousing, the warehouse automation is world-class, clearly world-class. If you look at their plays in a bunch of banking and other applications, I mean, they're already a player in many verticals. They just don't call themselves a vertical software player, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about how the hyperscalers, especially the platform layer, is going to affect the Salesforces and the SAPs and the ServiceNows, because clearly Benioff and Christian and so on don't want to invest CapEx, so they're happy for Amazon and Microsoft to do that. But Along with that comes with the risk of the platform being owned by the hyperscaler, right? And so, SAP is already talking about 4+1, the four major players plus its own. Salesforce will launch Hyperforce. Where do you see that middle turf going? I mean, are you starting to see headbutting already, or are we going to see that in 2021?
Then, if I could, there's sort of two angles on that. One, I forget, it was either around the second quarter of 2020 or the third quarter, but within the financial presentation that Salesforce released, they had a graphic that showed that no longer are there SaaS businesses, the largest businesses in the company, right? Not Marketing Cloud, not Service Cloud. The biggest business unit in Salesforce is Platform and Other. So yes, they're an applications company, but the biggest part of their business and the fastest growing part of their business is Platform and Other. So whether that's MuleSoft and Tableau, Einstein, some of those things they're doing. So I suspect that, people as smart as Mark Benioff saw some of this coming and said, I'm not going to play the Oracle game where we sort of fuzz the line between platform and infrastructure. I'm going to be a killer platform player here to surround all my applications with the things that connect outward. Vin, and then SAP, such an interesting question. I'm very bullish on them, right? For what can come into play in 2021, right? Between what they're doing with their incumbent power that they have. And you've written books about SAP, you know more about them than probably anybody on earth knows. So this, but if you take that power of their incumbency, then the stuff they're doing with industry cloud, then you see the natural move in a lot of industries, these industry alliance, like what they did with the automotive alliance. Well, that's not going to just stay in automotive. Those can move across different places. Then what they're doing with business networks. So in some ways, Vinnie, I think SAP has the ability to sort of create its own platform that is not shaped by the cloud or the cloud technology definition. It's shaped by industries. And what industries, this is almost like an industry platform. So we're going to have to stay, as people who look at this industry and comment on it, we're going to have to be more nimble in 2021, I think, than we've ever had to before, because the old definitions they're not going to apply.
I'm glad you said that, Bob, because to me, the most exciting thing in 2020 has been you mentioned Snowflake, right? Has been the emergence of two categories of players. One is more data oriented, so Snowflake, Palantir, C3, etc. And then the other category is vertical players, so Teladoc and telemedicine, nCino in banking, Shopify redefining e-commerce. It's not just, a lot of merchants don't want to work with Amazon. They've gone with Shopify, right? So are we seeing a little inflection point in the industry? Are these new players changing of the guard? Or are they going to be M&A fodder for some of the bigger guys?
Yeah, Vinny, could I add a third piece in that to what you just mentioned? That is, right, how many years was it ago that Mark Andreessen said software is eating the world? And then we started to hear, every company's a software company. Well, every company used software, but they weren't a software company. But more and more today, that's happening. So if every company in 2021 is more or less a software company, what then is the role of Workday, Salesforce, SAP, Oracle, and these others that, hey, wait, I'm a software company. Well, they have to change. They have to up their game and roll that around some too. So the industry-specific plays that you mentioned, I think, are going to be enormously powerful. You get these companies like Snowflake and Palantir come in, and they're just disrupting not so much the industry, but they're disrupting the expectations of customers, right? I don't have to do it that way. I don't have to try to take the tech industry's way of doing stuff and impose it on my business when I want to do some things that the tech industry didn't do before. So I think these what's that thing, Vinny, in the middle of a washing machine? Is it agitator, right? I think
it's a great term.
we've got these, they're not just disruptors, but they're constant agitators coming in saying, the way you got to here will not take you there. And we all, as in the tech industry and as business people, better understand that, because that line between the tech companies and the non-tech companies, that's fuzzing. Then who's a software company, who's a hardware company, that's fuzzing. Database, not. Platform, this, that, up, down, industry solutions. Yeah, it is going to be a wildly different landscape. And if I could draw any better than, my drawing is at best cave art, but it would be fun to try to picture graphically somehow, what's this evolution going to be like? And if you're a CEO in the pharmaceutical or the logistics business, how do you see your company within the emerging tech world, and what choices do you have that are wildly different in 2021 than they were just 2 years ago, Vinnie? So think about how different, again, they're going to be in 2022. So to me, it's not so much the managers who can take what I did last year and do it a little bit better for a nickel less, but it's going to be these wild-eyed innovators. So what Thomas Kurian did culturally for Google, unlocking that expertise, what Satya Nadella did to it, shaking up that, dusty old Microsoft that had said, we don't do buildings and hardware. It's like, well, how is, so anyway.
You make a great point. And if the tech industry is not careful, there'll be Amazons, there'll be fintech companies that come out of the big banks, there'll be logistics players that come out of traditional companies. Can't discount them. It's going to be a wild ride, Bob. It's 2021 and beyond. It's going to be a great decade to be part of.
But Vinnie, what is it in human nature that makes us think, all those lessons were true, except in my time or my company or my industry? Those rules of physics apply everywhere, but not for me. Why do people do that?
I think, Bob, you and I are probably exceptions in the analyst community. We tend to not look at how rapidly things evolve and how continuous the evolution is. In my time at Gartner, I created a lot of Magic Quadrants. Now I look at Magic Quadrants and say, they are just so static. The world just moves so quickly.
I was talking with some young people over the holiday here, Vinnie, and I showed somebody a photograph, and they were looking at, the old photographs that had the image in the middle and that sort of thick white border around the outside. And they were looking at it and they said, almost like, what is this? Wow. Not that many years ago, you'd put a little can in a camera, you'd take a photo, and the images would be captured on this thing. And then you'd get in your car and you'd drive. We went through the whole process, and the person was looking at me like I was crazy.
Bob, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, of course you. But it wasn't that long ago.
Look, we've done all kinds of things. Stand in line for boarding passes.
Deposit a check at a bank.
Be on hold for an hour for a simple question. Yep. We're showing our age, Bob. We could go on and on. I need to bring you back every few weeks to talk about the changes that are going on. But any final thoughts for 2020?
There were, like we said, Vin, a lot of parts of 2020 were anguishing for some people, and I think it put a hole in a lot of folks' hearts. That those losses can't be replaced. But 2021, I think, will be a year of abundant opportunity for people in every walk of life. And I hope that both mainstream business leaders, as well as the tech industry, I hope they will, continue to bring more of a human touch to everything they do. Because I think what we saw in 2020 is when you take the magic of the tech industry and give it a human touch, what's possible then, and stop doing things the way you did the year before just because that's easier for you, and instead try to think about what I'm going to do next year is going to be built around what the world is moving toward. I have unbridled optimism.
Bob, thank you for your coverage of the industry. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your optimism. Belated Merry Christmas. And, like you say, look forward to very different and much more opportunities in 2021.
Vinnie, thank you so much for letting me babble away here. And I just want to say, for me, 2020 had some heartaches, but also I've got a 12-month-old granddaughter now, and she has changed and enhanced my view of the world in many perspectives. So lots of great new things coming too in 2021 for sure.